This is back us in the chamber of the meeting, thanks to Rich and my just great man.
Good evening, everyone. Come on in and have a seat. There are, well, a couple more seats left. Front row, all of the A students sit in the front, and the my students at Anderson College. And the mayor is, of course, in the front. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Musial. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs and Strategic Partnerships here at the New England Aquarium. It is so exciting to welcome you to our home here on our beloved Central Wharf in the downtown waterfront. And of course, we are very proud and active members of our Wharf District Council. On behalf of our CEO, Vicki Spurl, it is my great pleasure to welcome to a monthly meeting of the Wharf District Council featuring our mayor, Michelle Whalen. There's a lot going on in our part of town. We're home to some of the best businesses, cultural destinations like ours, of course, and amazing restaurants. We are a hub and mix of vibrancy, beauty, and joy. And yet a weather scare like this past weekend keeps us on edge and is the constant reminder that we must do more and continually raise up the sense of urgency and action to make our waterfront more resilient, more inclusive, and more accessible. Back in the fall of 2018, the BPDA, then under different leadership, pulled us all together over in the Leventhal room and gave us a mandate: come together and come up with a plan. And thanks to folks like Mark and Suzanne, some of us here at the aquarium, so many of you, we did it. It was no small feat, and that's probably an understatement. But thanks to the team at Europe, we got there. However, there is much more hard work ahead, and it is crucial that we not let this plan die in a shelf. Mayor Wu, we welcome you. We know that you know that your leadership and support of moving this plan forward is everything. And so we're excited to hear from you this evening on how to work together to do just that. And so to introduce our amazing mayor, I'll turn it over to our Wharf District Council President, Mark Margulies.
Thank you very much, Rick. And first of all, thank you to the electeds that are representing us. I'm not sure who all is here this evening, but thank you very much for all your help. And also our friends from the Boston Police Department, who normally would give us a presentation on what a great job they're doing keeping us safe day after day. Thank you very much. Oh, there. Perfect. Thank you, Council, for being here. Before I introduce the mayor, I'd like to ask you all to remember our friend Chris Fincham, who passed away on September 7th. Chris was one of the founding members of the Wharf District Council, which he and Suzanne McCoy, and Jerry Weiner, and others started in 2002 as the Central Artery Completion Task Force, I think it was called then, and became the Wharf District Council in 2009. Chris was our treasurer for many years and was a good friend to all that he knew. I would ask you all to sort of a moment of silence in memory of Chris. Thank you very much. We'll miss you, Chris. I had the opportunity last week to hear Mayor Wu at the Chamber of Commerce presentation, and I was incredibly impressed by her accomplishments and by the innovation that she has and is bringing to the city, and the challenges that she talked about, like delivering better schools, safer neighborhoods, and more reliable public transportation, and expanded numbers of affordable housing, and more equitable resources to children and young families, and more predictable and expedited zoning, and more and supporting our growing and thriving business environment. She has a lot on her plate, and she's doing a great job at it, and we really appreciate it. The breadth and complexity and importance of the issues that Mayor Wu faces on a daily basis, frankly, to me, are staggering. And yet she continues to be optimistic and an inspirational leader and collaborator. And she's already accomplished a huge amount in her vision to make Boston even better still. The issues that concern the Wharf District are only a small part of what she has to take into consideration as part of her job. As we focus on our neighborhoods, streets, and traffic, sea level rise, vulnerability, and zoning, let us bear in mind that Mayor Wu has a whole city to run, with dozens of communities, all of whom think their issues too are of primary importance. With the enormous respect that she deserves, knowing that she is committed to working with the Wharf District as she is with all the other parts of Boston, let us welcome our mayor, Mayor Wu.
Everyone here today, thank you so much for coming out. I see there's still some empty chairs if anyone else who's standing wants to fill in, so please, and it seems there are chairs here too. Here. I am really honored and delighted to be here. This is probably the most gorgeous venue for a monthly meeting. Thank you to Rick and Vicki and the entire team for not only hosting us, but what you do to keep Boston in the national and international conversation, and what that means locally as well.
Amen.
I see some current and some former elected officials in the room. They all find each other. They're all sitting over there. So Mr. Chairman, our state representative, Aaron Michael Wiz, thank you for all of you. My good friends and people I look up to so much, Sal Matina, former city councilor, and Tito Jackson, former city councilor. Okay, so I'm gonna I mostly want to hear what your questions are, go back and forth. I'll say at a very high level, some general thoughts about this part of the city and about some of the issues that have been brought to my attention that you all have been working on. But I'm gonna put a big disclaimer at the beginning that everything I say and everything that I'm here to try to convey is only on behalf of and possible because of the amazing team at the City of Boston, who are the true experts. And so as I have been briefed on different items as they've reached my desk, truly the eyes and ears in the community is Sarah D'Amico, your name of the liaison here. And we have a couple folks in the back too who are just thinking very high level about how all the pieces fit together across every neighborhood. Commissioner of Environment, Allison Brizius. Thank you. There's many hats for the city, but our team of So I'll say, as Mark observed, there's a lot happening in the city and the world. I think overall, what marks this moment in our history is probably just disruption in general. It is very unpredictable to be in any major role leadership across any industry, across any sector. Certainly what you all feel here most vividly in terms of our citywide residents, climate events, weather events tend to drive a lot of that uncertainty and disruption. And it can be, even with the most advanced and far progressing technology, we still sometimes don't know what a major storm is going to do until it arrives. And the city is doing our best to prepare. We can get into some of those details if you're interested as well. But there's disruptions that come from the financial sector, as we're in a very difficult time with interest rates continuing to climb and even in the last few months or several months ago, seeing major banks that just crumbled because of the complexity of how our international markets are now all so interwoven, and decision-making and investments and capital and human capital are also fluid coming out of a post-pandemic economy. And there's also the disruption of just seeing where things are going to settle with work patterns, with transportation patterns. And it's still in Boston, as I had reported very recently in those remarks, all the signs and the kind of the ways that you can check the pulse of different metrics, they all look really good in our city. We're very lucky and very excited, and they look very good nationally. People are looking to say, how are you doing that in Boston? And the secret here is always, we just have a mix of the resources, the intellect, the expertise, and the civic engagement to ensure that we're all working together. And so what we're really trying to do on the city side is model a new approach, one that tries to tackle hard challenges head on. Frankly, so much of the disruption that we are facing is related on a global scale to waiting and not necessarily taking action, and letting the delay of prioritizing how we find challenges in things rather than find solutions in things lead us to sitting back. Boston, in that role, in terms of our national peers, we feel a lot of responsibility because this is where, relatively speaking, we have the resources to experiment, to take bold steps, to measure very carefully, and then to decide what we continue with and how we amplify or replicate, and then what we shift to a different direction. So I think the things that are on my mind most of all for a city of our needs and our opportunities, the vision is that Boston will be the best place in the country for families. That is both what we need for this moment, when people have a lot of choices about where to live, how to make decisions, where they could basically zoom into many different options and choose where they want to be with their own families. It's also, and that way, an economic decision as we think about the workforce and our talent that's coming in, and how we continue to make it affordable for people to be able to stay here. And then it's a question about the basic infrastructure, housing and transportation and childcare. Can we make it possible for everyone? So that is a focus writ large that looks differently in different parts of the city. Like the challenges for what it means to raise a family and have that sense of safety and security and health and well-being and opportunity in this part of the city is very much interwoven with issues around resilience and transportation access, and how you balance being a residential community in such an active and vibrant high foot traffic area of the community that receives so many visitors as well. How do we balance those needs and ensure that our residents, the people who are building and growing our community, are at the forefront of decision making there. So that has meant we try to break down silos within departments. You'll see, in announcements that we make, that usually it's not just the purview of any single department taking action. Today, for example, we celebrated that Boston will become the newest city to have a professional women's soccer team. The way that deal was set ended up, we tried to find every bit of opportunity in there. And so not only will that be a huge economic boom and boon and just fun thing for the city, but they will work with us to revitalize White Stadium in Franklin Park, which is a Boston Public Schools owned asset. It will stay that way. It will continue to be the home for our Boston Public Schools athletics teams as well. And the soccer team will play out of there, and we're sharing the space and co-developing it together. This will be the only professional sports team playing out of a public school owned facility with students.
Wow.
And similarly, we are just trying to make the decisions that can feel challenging and difficult in the short term, but are really about trying to make sure that we still have a city that families can live in 50 years, or forget 50 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line. And so following your lead on many of the conversations around resilience that were referenced earlier, how we come together and work with our partners at the state level, but really this scale of what we need is going to have to require major federal partnership to put in the resources and make the infrastructure changes that are needed. So why don't we dive in on what's on your mind specifically? I could guess, but I'll wait for you.
I'll start with a question if I may, and then I know we have some others that would have you remark on.
Thank you. So Mayor, State Street, which is one of America's iconic historic streets, has really been devastated by the loss of retail, in part to the controversy over how to renovate it. Obviously, this is a local concern, not the big picture that you are addressing, but I wanted to mention that given that the Wharf District residents and businesses seem to be intractably at odds with what the Department of Streets wants to do on State Street, and nothing has happened there, is there something that you can do to move the repair of State Street forward to help bring it back to vitality?
Okay, that would have been, if I were a betting person, that was better my question for. So I will just say, I have been briefed on the plans. I've been pretty immersed in more recently in some of the discussions about what the goals are. The primary goal for State Street is to ensure that it can accommodate the space for the vibrant pedestrian experience that it ends up being for so many. That's people who are walking around this neighborhood, people who are on their way to some of the buildings around here, whether for work or to shop and to enjoy the restaurants, and people who are leaving their car somewhere in the vicinity and accessing some of the amenities around here. So what has driven the plan so far is that there are certain parts where the sidewalk is, I mean, this is a major reconstruction project to dramatically boost the pedestrian capacity of this roadway. We are zooming out a city where we don't have the luxury of just accessing more space when we want to do things generally. So as population grows, as we're thinking about how to continue to boost vitality, it is about moving more people on the same allocation of space that we already have. And so having that ability and first goal of expanding the sidewalks is as I understand, what has driven this plan and this development. In certain places, it'll be 3 feet wider. In certain places, it'll be somewhere around 18 inches wider, and a safer experience for all of those who are trying to get to where they need to go. As I understand here and in many places around the city, the bike lanes are probably the biggest controversial point as it relates to what it means could have gone there instead, and whether that could have accommodated a higher volume of vehicular traffic that would then ease congestion or have some other impacts. Part of the approach that the city has been taking is to study, measure, and then report back on some of what has happened. And the most recent numbers from this kind of pilot stage, this interim state, show that it is below, I think some 80%, 90% of what pre-pandemic congestion levels were. We're not quite sure, exactly what the point is when we can call traffic is back to normal. And so all of the measurements are kind of comparable, but overall, in terms of all the different signs that we're seeing, traffic is back generally across the city. We're seeing strong recovery on public transit systems. So in terms of at what point we can take an accurate snapshot of what that data says, we believe that the measurement that this is still below pre-pandemic traffic levels is one that we can look to, and that it hasn't in this test phase generated a whole bunch of additional congestion. The question around how do small businesses or businesses in general thrive with this is a really important one that also pulls in curbside management. It pulls in the mix of businesses. It pulls in the incentives that we're providing for supporting or trying to encourage the transition to a more residential neighborhood. We will no city in the country is going to be able to rely on a primarily commercial downtown as the generator for economic vitality in that part of the city. the major employers that are, I think, on the, more strong arming side of the spectrum in terms of getting folks to come, employees to come back downtown, they're probably at no more than 40% of people being back here. And so State Street is a corridor where we see some of the prime candidates as well for those office to residential conversions. And as we think about the street, having that, again, primarily accommodating pedestrian with a view to this transforming more and more and more into a residential experience has been the primary goal. I am, I have been in this city government role for a little while now. It's easy in a room to know what people want you to say. And I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you what the decision-making process has been so far and how I'm thinking of it. There's still work to go here, but in terms of how we envision this particular corridor, I mean, this is the original Main Street of Boston. This is the place that we have to get it right and show how we can make all of this mix of different people from different backgrounds, using different modes of transportation, getting to all different locations, how we can make it work. Our belief is that the measurements that have been taken show that when we can separate out the bikes to get them out of traffic, expand the sidewalks, and then really manage the curve in a much more effective way, so you won't see that kind of double parking spilling over. Okay, I'm seeing some skeptical looks in the audience. I hear it. I just want to tell you that I hear that. We have to make some changes so that more people can move on these roads. This street deserves a major, major makeover. And as the primary corridor for what we want people to understand as Boston's vitality, plus where we believe the measurements are for traffic congestion and what the impacts would be, having that bike lane run all the way down would be an important part of maintaining this. So I am sorry if that is disappointing to folks in this room. I again, want to be transparent about how we're thinking about things. But there are very important ways in which this change and all the pieces of it, not just the lanes and the allocation, but the interaction with which businesses need what type of parking right outside, should translate directly into a different experience for everyone, and hopefully residents most of all.
Here, I would hope that the Wharf District Council's, I would hope that the Wharf District Council's alternative plan for Milk Street to be a better and safer bike lane route, and our plan for State Street has gotten to your desk at some point, because we have unanimous consent on the fact that despite head of the department's insistence otherwise, that we really do know that area quite well, and we have a different vision for it. So I would ask you to take a look at it at some point.
I will make sure on that piece. I know because it's a more recent part of the conversation. I will make sure that there's a full vetting on that, and I'm plugged into that as well.
Thank you very much. I think Norm had a question that he was ready for you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Wu, thank you for coming. I'm Don Reitner, and I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees for that building right over there at Albert Towers. And if you look at it, you can see that the water's coming up and it's close to low tide now. The question I have is about zoning for letting buildings like Harbor Towers, older buildings that are in jeopardy in the flood zone for 2070, or in this case for even 2030, to be able to make changes to their property, because they can't wait for a district-wide solution or a city-wide solution. And right now, there's nothing in the code that deals with resiliency, even though it's a major part of your platform. So we're wondering how, as opposed to the spot zoning that goes on right now for something like that, how you can help deal with that. Thank you.
And I didn't hear what the final result was, but I have asked the team to engage a little bit more fully in the specific proposal. I don't know if you're referring to the plan to enclose and create more of a barrier directly, but we want to do what we can to help you all make that work while also Allison, do you have any update on this one? I don't want to put you on the spot if not, but.
So on the broad work district council plan.
Sure.
We actually just had a wonderful working session with Mark and everyone for a few hours with city council. So you were talking about harbor towers and zoning specifically as a part of.
And not just for
Okay.
our building, but
Yeah.
all the buildings everywhere in Boston.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting and a good question. We have done a lot of work for the BPA, has done a lot of great work for zoning of substantial reconstruction of the new buildings. But taking a deep look at what could enable retrofits more quickly that are truly resilience retrofits as opposed to a broader redevelopment is absolutely one we take back to the team. I think, as you well know, a lot of the most immediate challenges will be around permitting routines that cost us a week into the state. So that's gonna be a lot of the work we have in the state has been, we talked about this recently earlier today, but they've released a process and a plan by which we're all gonna work together to deeply look at the state level plan. So we're excited to be launching that project.
And here, I know, in some ways, we have a little bit of an unusual situation where the private property owner and the residents actually are saying funding is not the main question here. It is about what counts as FAR and then how to not fall into the rabbit hole of the interaction of all those pieces of code. So I know we're looking at it, the BPDA team is looking at it within that lens too, to try to not hold back resilience improvements that are necessary and also ready to go, and budgets are also going up while the delays are happening. So I know we're thinking about that on this particular issue. And as the commissioner was saying, the citywide zoning around resilience is a really important part of why we are trying to centralize in some ways or make more cohesive our planning efforts. One thing I should mention is one of the major structural reforms that we're putting in place is to shift planning over to a planning advisory council that has not only the BPDA thinking about the built environment in terms of buildings and FAR and height and density, but the environment team, transportation team, housing, small businesses, the disability team, they're all part of evaluating changes to code, changes to planning, and how all of those projects will be interacting. Even the most recent proposal I saw for how the historic preservation arm of the city is going to be revamped is going to have a very clear resiliency and climate focus as well.
Pass it over to Vicky, our host.
Hi, I'm Vicky Spruill. I'm sorry I was late, and thank you, Mayor Wood, for everything you're doing.
But you were in traffic, it wasn't.
Yeah,
State
fine.
Street or High.
I was gonna say it, and then I thought, no, traffic is definitely back. Yeah. On this issue of coordination within the city, what might we do to convene not just city officials, but state and federal officials? How could this body be helpful? Because, it's hard enough to do what you're doing at the city level, but especially given what's at stake here, billions and billions of dollars in infrastructure. How can we accelerate and be more efficient in convening? Any thoughts on?
Yeah, well, I won't speak for the state. There are folks in the room who know a lot better. I will just say that, I am nearing the 2-year mark, which will be this November. It took me, a little bit of unusual circumstances coming in with every bargaining unit contract expired, this and that cabinet roles all vacant because of unusual transitions. But it took me a good 6 months even to get everyone hired. And then probably another 6 months for all of the high level cabinet heads to hire their next level of leadership. And now in the last 6 months, we've really been able to be off and running and delivering on some of the major pieces that we are moving on. So I know the governor is still brand new in the scheme of things, and she's already made some really important changes around how to organize her own structures, really elevating climate and resiliency as well. And they're starting to get into the back and forth with municipalities around how does the 10 communities pilot function and other different programs that might be available. I think as they're getting to the point where they've stacked up and have the vision and are on their way, we would be happy to fold into our conversations with them about kind of nitty gritty things. How do we just keep expanding that coalition and make sure that we're all at the table together? Because frankly, the city and the state are going to need to strap up and go fight in DC for the money to come here. And that's where the real battle is.
You have time for another question? So I know a number of people have been studying Plan Downtown, which is the new study for those of you who haven't had a chance to see it yet. It outlines yours and others' vision for a transformed zoning code and development plan, I guess you would say, for Boston. One of the things that we are still trying to understand is the fact that the Greenway is a dividing line through the middle of the district as opposed to the heart of our district, and seems to bifurcate our neighborhood. Apart from that particular aspect, which we have a problem with, could you tell us a little bit about how you feel about Plan Downtown and where that takes us all?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple areas where we are very much in transition in terms of resetting the city's approach to planning and development. We're getting there in terms of organizational structure. We have just shifted compliance of various things over from the BPDA, for example, over to the Office of Housing, which has its own art. So there are little things that aren't ever going to be noticed publicly that actually have a big impact on even internal capacity to think about issues like this and who's available to do that kind of long range planning. This is a very new muscle for the city, frankly. Just as an example, the city has had, many folks in this room, and I've been around in politics long enough to remember when the BPDA was the BRA, right? And the name changed or that P was added, so the planning was solidly in there. But frankly, the way that employees and the workforce were assigned into different roles, the planners were still spending about 50% of their time, sometimes more, on development review, because the way the system was set up, that's where the need was, and there was overwhelming work, and that's what people were getting pulled. So if anything, the very small number of people who are actually available to think about planning like that, and then the planners who are trained that way, having to juggle so many different items, it was making it impossible for the city to do that at a pace and a depth and scale that was necessary. Also, I want to recognize the City Council President Ed Flynn is in the room. Thank you. So all of that is to say that as we are under transition, we are trying to wrap up some of the old way of things being done and make sure that the multiple years that we're putting into that really results in something that is tangible and actionable and in line with where we're headed. But at the same time, make a note that we're not going to be pursuing this kind of large scale neighborhood plan in the future, because we can't wait for, Plan Downtown has been how many years, probably 5 years in the making at this point, with lots of stops and starts. And anyway, we're shifting to a much more precise, almost scalpel-like approach to zoning and planning that will focus on the tangible, the concrete of neighborhood commercial corridors and squares and streets. So, but what are we doing with the 4 that are remaining? Plan Downtown, Plan Mattapan, Plan Charlestown, and Plan East Boston. The hope is to really incorporate and take these into zoning. That's also something that is different from what has happened in the past, where plans have stayed as general suggestions and guidelines, but not necessarily become hard and fast rules, even after multiple years of engagement were put into them. Overall, I think there were a couple of points of, you could go either way within the Plan Downtown. One is whether Chinatown would be included or not. One is where the exact boundaries were. One is where that one particular building happens with that one spot that if you know. And then one is just how do you wrap that all into historic preservation while ensuring that this remains a very vital and vibrant developing corridor as well. So I think for the most part, the balance has been pretty good, in terms of lots and lots of input and feedback coming there. I will just, and, you know, again, these processes are not perfect. Had we had them from the very beginning, maybe they would have gone, you know, in terms of the engagement and the process. I wish we weren't inheriting so many things right at the very end and having to decide whether to throw it all away or try to, you know, make sure that we can make good of it, even if everything that came before, reflected different times and pre-pandemic and all of that. So overall, we will be moving something, forward. I think there's still conversations to be had about the specific uses and all that are represented. As you all know, downtown is in a state of flux. We, can't rely on those office buildings, and I'm fairly skeptical about adding lots more new downtown office, because I don't believe that is in the long-term interest where we're gonna be creating more opportunity rather than just pushing vacancies elsewhere. And so have been driving as hard as possible that downtown should be a residential, it is a residential neighborhood, but our actions and our goals should be pushing it even more so, with incentives wherever that's possible. And that means thinking very carefully about transportation impacts, historic preservation, and how that all fits together.
Well, we certainly welcome your neighbors, and I would like to think that we can offer some more input to that plan before it becomes zoning, because in fact, I think there were some opportunities missed there. Suzanne, you want to say something?
Yes. Wanted to add, I was on the AG for a plan downtown, and one of the components that is concerning myself and I would say the Wharf District Council is they have moved the boundary of this neighborhood to Mark's point. They now pushed it east so that the Greenway becomes the border between the Wharf District neighborhood and the downtown neighborhood. The downtown neighborhood was always west of Congress Street, and they've effectively cut our neighborhood in half.
So this point actually, and I'm sorry, I didn't address it earlier. This was raised to me in some of the recent briefing conversations that Ciara and I have been in as well. And that the agency, the BPDA, wants to make sure that we get the neighborhood boundaries right. So that is not meant to try to shift or shrink or anything. So I think this point is on the list of folks, is on everyone's minds on the list of things that need to be addressed.
Great, that's wonderful. One last question. Back here.
Oh, yes, I do have a question. I'm not sure if it technically falls under the Wharf District Council, but we just moved to Boston 2 years ago, and we love it.
Where did you move from?
Connecticut. And I love walking around. My husband constantly comments on, how did you disappear for so long? I mean, I just walk around everywhere. And it's very disturbing to me what's happening on Washington Street. You keep talking about all these grand plans of developing downtown and paying attention to this and paying attention to that. Are there any plans on Washington Street? It used to be such a grand street.
And are you talking about is vacancies? Are you talking about safety issues? Are you
All of the above. It has a gorgeous development with that Millennium Towers, and there's something else at the other end down near the Ritz. I'm not sure what it's called. But it can be really creepy to walk there sometimes. You can't turn it into Newbury Street, but what's happening?
Yes, yeah, okay, so this is really important, and I have been in so many conversations lately where people are worried about, particularly in certain parts of downtown, what the condition is around safety and how they're feeling. I will say that overall, I think for me, my job is always to try to put everything in context as well, and in terms of the pure numbers and the data and the reporting that our amazing police department does, Boston has been on a decline in terms of reported public safety. So the data bears it out, and I will I will be happy to, share back with, or can make sure there's a broader conversation. In terms of reported incidents, compared to any other major city, Boston is at the bottom of that list, and our numbers have been going down. However, we are a city where, because our standards for safety are so high, that means that every individual incident is something that we take very seriously, and that when there are incidents, particularly that might be related to unpredictable or unexpected situations of violence, that can have a real ripple effect. And then there's a little bit of a reinforcing effect where the primary driver of safety in an area like downtown, and of course, in addition to having the baseline of supported police department and law enforcement and public safety agencies, the primary driver of safety is foot traffic, right? Whether an area is as busy as it should be, or if it just feels desolate and that's the whole theory of dense downtown areas, is more eyes on the street, is more safety, more small businesses open and active, and people coming back and forth into the night is safety. And so that's again, long-term things to do, and we need to work on that. That is part of the reason why we're pushing so hard on that front to convert from office to residential as well, is that when you have buildings that are emptied out at a certain time of day or certain days of the week and throughout the weekend altogether, it will never feel as active and therefore as safe as it could and should be. Residential activity is always the best way to anchor a neighborhood, and we intend to continue that and keep that going. In terms of the specific recent concerns around public safety incidents in the area, several of our departments have been working together on this, obviously following the lead of Commissioner Michael Cox, the police department, but it's even to the granularity of having a specific strategy with Macy's and other locations that have had concerns, working with them very closely, bringing in the school department, because they sometimes have closer connection to some of the young people who might be involved or families, and knowing person by person how we're going to reach them and not only have the accountability that comes whenever you are involved in an incident, but the services that will hopefully ensure that you're not involved in any future incidents. Some of these, we're seeing this trend across the country with younger and younger people involved in situations, many of whom, over this past summer had no record at all. And we're kind of, we need to make sure that we're investing as much as we can in programs and activities for our young people who are hungry and eager to be involved in the city and are coming off of a very difficult last few years. We saw the number of paid summer jobs that the city offered more than double, or we were at more than 9,000 young people involved in paid summer jobs. We're going to crack 10,000 next year. Have programs to host block parties and put funding into the community so that each part of our city have activity and things to do. But that also can't cut off in the summer, because we know that especially in these days when school has started, but everyone's still looking for something to do, that we have to be very active. We've engaged our youth engagement office on this, Boston Center for Youth and Families, Economic Opportunity Cabinet, along with our police department and Boston Public Schools on the kind of pure safety side. But if there are specific ideas that you all have or ways to, again, I'm really trying to separate out how do we address what is happening and make it clear that we expect everyone in our city to be safe, and we expect everyone in our city to behave in a way that fosters other people's safety, while also not feeding into sometimes one particular incident causing a ripple effect that can then spiral into that perception becoming more of a reality. And so we have to do the right job of communicating what we're doing and communicating the reality of facts on the ground, just so we can be operating from the same set of facts. This is a city where we are, again, compared to other cities about our size or slightly larger, we have a 10th of the homicides, a 10th of the shootings that some of these other cities are experiencing. However, we spent a lot of time in Boston analyzing and going to experts and bringing in community members who are doing the work on these best practices. 5% of the street segments in Boston account for more than 75% of the shootings in our city. It is the concentration on certain communities, certain families that re-traumatization, that we are looking to really empower community to break the cycle of often the interplay of lots of different factors. And so we're pursuing a number of different strategies to work directly on those areas, those micro places that are our opportunity zones in Boston. Downtown is not one of those areas that has, one of the, is on the radar as one of the highest kind of, in terms of public safety incidents, but it's a different kind of perception and impact of public safety here, because it does affect a lot of people, including many who don't live here. And I have to do a better job of finding ways to communicate what are we doing, what's working, and what's left to do.
Thank you.
As I said before, I think you have an incredibly broad portfolio that you are responsible for. And we have every confidence that you will continue to do a great job. Thank you for coming to join us this evening. And I would ask you all to stick around as many as you can. We have many more really important things on the agenda that are of critical importance to all of us in the Wharf District. So again, thank you very much, Mayor, and best of luck to you going forward. Yeah. We're fortunate to have Council President Flynn here, who is available to say a few words, if you will, please, Council. Sure.
Thank you, Mark, and honored to be here and to represent this district, District 2, which obviously includes the Wharf District. And just want to say thank you to the incredible work that the Wharf District Council plays every day in addressing quality of life issues, neighborhood concerns, public safety issues. I, as a district city council, I treat this area of the city the same as any other traditional neighborhood that deserves your fair share of basic city services and neighborhood services. At times, I don't think you get it. I don't think you get the level of basic city services that you deserve. Our police department does an incredible job in this city. We're fortunate that we have an outstanding police department. We don't have enough police officers in Boston. Our police officers are working 16 hours mandatory, pretty much several days a week. That's unhealthy for a city. That's unhealthy for a department, for the officer and his or her family, and for the community. I've been advocating hiring more police officers. I think it's desperately needed. We were able to overcome about $30 million cuts that my colleagues wanted to make on the police department during the recent budget debate. But it's critical we work together advocating for more police, for basic city services, resources. I had an opportunity to work close with Suzanne and Mark for many years. I'm familiar with the boundaries of the Wharf District Council. I know about Plan Downtown and dividing this community. Very unfair. That's what the BRA has done traditionally in the past, divided communities. Especially for the longtime residents of the city that know about the BRA. But I'm gonna fight like hell to preserve the Wharf District Council boundary. Once you start watering down the boundaries and you start dividing people, it diminishes your influence you have with elected officials, in my opinion. It diminishes your advocacy on city services, neighborhood services. That's a critical issue I'm focused on. And also, I'm going to continue challenging the city of Boston on several issues. One that I'm still upset about is the way they treated the Wharf District Council, the Wharf District, as it relates to transportation related issues in and around State Street with biking. And I highlight that not to be divisive, but I highlight that because I felt your voice wasn't heard in the debate. Maybe your voice was heard, but you weren't respected during the debate. And the decision was made before they were even meeting with you. And I've met with the city transportation chief of streets, and I think the way he handled the situation was very poorly. And I don't like to be critical of people, but I'm gonna defend and advocate the best I can for my constituents. And that's what I've done for the last 6 years. I'm honored to represent you. I know there's gonna be a change and transition, and you probably, most of you will have a new city councilor. In January, I thought I heard a clap in the back. Was that you, Mike? No, okay, I just wanna make sure. But my wife and I love coming here and walking around and going to all the events. But please know, whether I represent you officially or not, count me as a friend and advocate, someone I respect this neighborhood, the people of this neighborhood, and I'm gonna do everything I can for you, whether I'm your elected official or not. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for coming.
Well, okay, continuing our program, we're going to have a presentation for the first time about 407 Atlantic Avenue. The Nanfone plans to develop that building as a life science building. I think Matthew Powers is perhaps here. He is. Come on up, Matthew. And I think that if let's see, there's our, there we go. Great. We do have a presentation. Thank you. Okay.
Mark, thank you for having us. Appreciate the opportunity to get in front of you all. What we want to do is just share overview of the project for you all, explain a little bit about who we are, what we do. It's obviously very fortunate for us to be here, same night the mayor's here. What we do, and I'll explain more in detail, we are very myopically focused on constructive reuse of existing buildings in Boston. Our team are all Bostonians. We've all been here for a very long period of time, reside in the city. And so we saw an opportunity with the previous administration and with Mayor Wu, discussions around BERDO and changes in sustainability and all the different environmental issues that we're trying to address as a city, as a real opportunity for us to hyper focus on what we do in redeveloping space for life science use. So we'll walk you through some of the slides today, and I'll talk about some of it at a very high level. We're doing at 470 Atlantic. Many of you know the building was permitted under the former BRA regime. And it was a very different process. It was a different use. It was a different economy at that point in time, right? So building was primarily occupied by insurance companies and financial institutions, and has a parking garage inside the building on the second floor today. There's 2 curb cuts currently on Atlantic Ave for vehicular traffic in and out of the building. And so the systems, while the building was updated about 11, 12 years ago, as you all know today, any major mechanical systems, building systems that are 12 years old, merely halfway through their useful life, but there's been so many vast improvements in environmental technologies in recent years that they're quite inefficient in carbon footprint. It is not really up to standard for what we would expect for a city like Boston. So much like the mayor was talking about kind of the key initiatives for the city and the resilience plan, that is really our goal. I'll show you some of what we do and how we do it, and we'll show you in some of the slides as we walk through. So at a high level, tell you a little bit about our team, tell you about the project, happy to answer any questions, want it to be kind of interactive if you like. So very quickly going to go through this. We kind of anticipated some things that you all may want to know about. What's happening in the ground floor. The building is subject to Chapter 91. We've been working with the state DEP for the project to go through it. A roof plan, construction logistics plan, and project benefits. And we'll talk in more detail on all these, and happy to answer any questions. You know, one of the challenges, I don't know if Norm left, but you know, right. So, you know, one of the things you bring up is interesting, right? We face a lot of the same issues and concerns that you face. So we actually, and this is Denny Witten, by the way, Senior VP of Development for our team, and I'm Matthew Bowers, I'm the CEO. So we initially evaluated this building for a full conversion for electrical support for the project. There's literally no way to actually do that and be compliant with city code to stay within 30% of the rooftop area for mechanical systems. It's not possible to do with equipment that's available today. So at the very minimum, to go in that approach, which is the best environmental solution, we'd have to cover approximately 50% of the rooftop. So we wouldn't be compliant with code. And there's no way to go through, there's no avenue today to go to anybody in the city of Boston and say, hey, you all agree this would be a great way to do this project. And great people at EPDA say, yeah, that would be a great way to do that. But there's no way to do it within the code we have today. So in 5 years, maybe there's a chance we can look at doing it that way. So we're trying to push the envelope. We'll talk more about it. This project, we're going with a full steam conversion for everything in here, which is the next best, most environmental solution for running a project like this. The other thing I'll talk to is just your question about Washington Street. You know, we're fully in agreement with the mayor, right? The greatest way to solve that is have full buildings, right? So you walk around downtown Boston and, you know, we all know what's going on with return to work. Half our buildings are half empty, right? So there's not as many people there. So one job you can't do work from home is a bench scientist in a lab that's developing novel therapeutics. So we look at Boston, we say this is the greatest city in the world. We love it here. We live here. It's all about innovation. It's about getting the best people here. And for a lot of reasons, we think it makes a lot of sense. We'll talk more in detail, but putting life sciences into these buildings is a reasonable constructive reuse of the existing assets, right? That's here, what's here and available. It's great to talk about a residential conversion. If you talk to residential developers, it's really hard to convert an office building for residential use, right? So office buildings are designed to accommodate office tenants. None of you want a condo that's in the core of the building that has no exterior windows. And none of you want a really long, skinny condo or apartment, right? So it's really hard to do that. You can do it with code, you can change it, and you're tearing the building down. And so for every building of this size of this building, and the group that we bought it from was looking at actually tearing it down. By tearing it down, you basically consume 30,000 tons of embodied carbon. So what we do, we specialize in reusing these buildings and converting them to the most efficient use from an environmental perspective for a life science use that we firmly believe has a very long lifespan in the city of Boston. And we'll have buildings that are occupied and actually have people coming in and going to work. So then the next question is, well, we all concerned about traffic in the city of Boston. So in our project, we'll talk about it in more detail as we get into it here, but we're actually removing the parking garage. So we think that is a measure that creates a situation where less people will be driving vehicles. There'll be more people walking to work, less people walking down Atlantic Ave that'll be worried about getting run over by cars coming in and out of the garage there. So we think that's a real public benefit for people as well. And so we're going to take that away from the building. Some of the key goals for us, I started with these slides on sustainability because it's part of what we are and who we are. So we are a subsidiary of Nan Fung Group, which is a 70-year-old company based in Hong Kong. It was a world-leading textile manufacturer. So in the late 70s, when all of us in the Western world were wearing denim jackets and jeans. They were the ones making jean jackets and denim, so they're a large manufacturer of denim. The founder of the company was a Buddhist. He was traveling around and decided didn't want to be in textiles anymore. Sold the textile business, got into real estate development. So the company's been doing real estate development forever. And so you'll see we use acronyms for a lot of what we do that have some reference to textiles, because if you love the history of the company, it's really interesting for those of you who have a penchant for history. You'll know downtown Boston, particularly this building, the buildings in this area, was a real leader in textiles for our country as well. So there's an interesting play there, but we call it our SOIT initiatives, instead of ESG or sustainability. And so for us, our SOIT stands for social cohesion, environmental improvements, wellness, innovation, and technology. And we think those 5 pillars are the most important things to society and what we're trying to do. So all we do, by the way, as you can infer by our name, is life science real estate development for our company. We don't build hotels, we don't build residential buildings. All we do is these conversions that we do here, office buildings, lab buildings. So we have 4 buildings currently in downtown Boston. We have 470 Atlantic, we have 51 Sleeper Street, we have 1 Winthrop Square, and we have 2 Financial Center. So I think one thing we can share with you, I don't think we have any slides on this or anything to show you, but right, as Bostonians, I'll use 1 Winthrop Square as a good example of what we're trying to do. Those of you who are familiar with 1 Winthrop Square, it's, I think, one of the most architecturally significant buildings in the city. Mark could tell me more about what he thinks of that, whether he does agree or not. That building has a very amazing, interesting history, not the least of which was at one point, it was the printing press for the predecessor of the Boston Herald. And so the building's been through many iterations. In per zoning, we could have added 5 more floors on top of that building and 100,000 square feet. So it's zoned with a 10.0 FAR. It's currently sits at 5.0. So if we're a typical real estate developer, you want to maximize your investment, right? And so we said, you know what? That would be apocryphal to put a glass box on top of this absolutely building, landmark, beautiful architectural building in downtown Boston. So we didn't do that. So we converted it for lab use. It's fully rented out, full of some of the top life science companies in the industry. It's something we're personally very proud of. It sits next to, Winthrop Center, which is a beautiful building as well, and is passive house design. There's going to be a brand new Winthrop Square Park in front of the building that should be opening the end of October. I share that with you not to pat ourselves on the back, but to actually show you a concrete example that we're not just pure developers trying to squeeze every nickel out of the building. We're trying to do what's right for the fabric of the city of Boston, do what's right for the environment. That building, that project, with the change out that we've done there, putting in it all brand new mechanical systems, the most environmentally friendly that we could find to accommodate the project. We saved about 10,000 tons of carbon on that project and what we've done. So this is not just, we don't just talk about this as something that we strive to achieve. This is part of who we are. It's in the DNA of who we are as a company. The other part is the social cohesion part. So as the mayor talked about, a lot of the issues in the city right now, the data seems to point to issues with inner city youth. And so we're working, unfortunately can't share too much details today. We'll come back another time after share. But we're really proud that we're working with what we think are 2 of the most well-respected, influential, not-for-profit organizations in the city of Boston, where we are bringing forward life science training programs and educational programs for inner city youth in the city of Boston, where we'll bring them in our buildings, we'll teach them what happens in labs, we'll teach them about careers in labs. And all of our projects, what we try to do to show transparency, we do what we call labs on display. So if you walk over to 1 Winthrop Square and walk around, you can look in and see labs there. You can walk in the lobby, you can see labs there, you can see scientists working. We try and do that to ensure people this is a safe work environment. It's a great place to be. There's a buzz there, there's scientists doing really cool stuff. And people are welcome to come in and see it. And so we use that space. The second purpose of that is that our tenants, also some of their employees, help with the training and education programs that we're going to be launching. So when we talk about social cohesion, that's the other component that we talk about. So I share for you with all that detail so that you know a little bit about who we are. So let's talk a little bit about the project and who's on the project. So some of you probably aren't familiar with Nanfang Life Sciences Real Estate, but I'm sure you're familiar with all the names on the slide here. All local teams, local developers, the construction teams led by Wise Construction. The architects are SGA. Mark's not throwing his pen at me right now for that, but we work with BR+A, McNamara Salvia. So all folks that I'm sure you're all aware of have been doing this for a very long time in Boston. We bore you with that level of detail just so that you know throughout the whole project team, this is a Boston-based team that's committed to what's right for the city of Boston. So at a very high level, as I said, we're converting the building for lab use. This is just a rendering of what it looks like when it's done, hopefully. And so you'll notice that from this rendering, if you're familiar with the building, the labs are on the harbor side of the building. So today it's and I'll show you a floor plan. So you can pull this up. So here's an existing floor plan. See if you can see the cursor. So this side of the building is what's facing the harbor and the channel. This is Atlantic Ave and the Greenway. On this side of the building over here is where the Intercontinental is. So on the upper floors, this whole building is office. What we've done is we've split the building down the middle, basically. And so this half stays office. To be respectful of the folks that live at Intercontinental, there's no change in use. It's exactly what's there today. There's no major impact. And then the labs will be on this side of the building. So, so that's the design, and that's what you see illustrated in the rendering here. We've gone through a very extensive process. We acquired the building about 2 years ago. So we've spent a significant amount of time with all the city agencies, as the mayor talked about, really focusing on planning, right? Rather than just regulatory approval. And so we've met with all the different city departments to talk about what is the best opportunity to make improvements here and have a very positive impact on the community. So there's a lot of things we like to do beyond what we're talking about today. And we'd love to talk to you all more about it. You all have more influence than we do, but there's a lot of things we'd like to do to activate the space more. There's always a fine balance for people like us because there's neighbors there, right? So there's people who live in that Intercontinental who might not want a ton of activity next door. We think it makes a vibrant place. We think it makes the city a great place. So happy to talk to anybody about that in more detail, but the project's fully permitted. We just list all the different groups here that we've worked with and got approval from city, state, and federal input as well. And so we're about to move into the phase where we're going to make significant changes. So the ground floor plan here, this is the area that's subject to Chapter 91. So the area we're highlighting here in red, this is the only really notable change, which is change to the loading dock and the removal on the second floor of the parking garage. So currently there's a ramp that goes up. The parking garage, believe it or not, is actually on the second floor. I don't think I've ever seen that in any other building. So that comes out, that ramp gets changed and this curb cut gets changed. But other than that, there's no major changes. The Chapter 91, the public access space, none of that is changing. The only thing we are trying to do with the public access space is these charitable groups that I mentioned that we're partnering with and finalizing that here in the coming weeks. We'll be hosting events in life science leadership and training and educational opportunities in the building. And so some of that will be, more activity in the sense that we'll be bringing in, we'll have different series where we bring in very specific kind of scientific equipment or a scientist to come talk about processes and things like that. So there'll be much more activity than what happens today. To be honest with you, a lot of people don't know that it's public access space. There's a couple of groups that use it on Wednesdays, but by and large, the signage isn't great. And a lot of people don't know actually that it's public access space. So that's important for us to try and fix that. The next important point, that I'm sure everyone likes to hear about is kind of what's going on with the roof plan. What does that mean for views? How does it impact everyone around you? So as you see here in this diagram, what we try to do is actually show you actual pieces of equipment. So for those of you who don't look at plans all the time, this right here is a view of the roof, essentially from above, looking down on the roof and where the equipment is located and how much square footage it is. So as you see here, this is what I was talking about when I was talking about trying to look at more environmentally friendly ways to do it. When we looked at an electrical plan, This number goes from 26% to 50%, which is now allowed by the city of Austin. So your total mechanical rooftop equipment has to cover less than 30% of the area.
How tall are these new vents going to be?
So do we have anything on height? There's no change in the overall. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. So this question was, what is the overall height? So let me go up here. And so that's why we put the, sorry, go up to the slide. So that's why we put this in so that you can see everything is within the penthouse and the existing roof screens. So that from the street or from anywhere around, there's no change to the view at all. So the actual height, I'm not sure if I have the actual height, you know, off the top of your head.
Like the same size as the existing equipment that's up there. There's two cooling towers that are up there now. The additional equipment is gonna be a similar height.
Same height?
We were thoughtful about how we located them towards the middle of the plan and really looked carefully at the screening of the existing.
You know,
So this that you see here, just for clarification, this gray area in the red is the existing roof screen. That stays, that doesn't change, and this rendering is showing you post-project. That there's, you know, there's nothing unsightly, there's no changes there in terms of what the views are.
So nothing gets any higher than what it is now.
Correct. What that, he asked, does anything get any higher? You know, technically, something maybe 3 inches higher or 6, there's no significant change in height for the project. Yes.
Still would be pushing inches higher than normal. Very well, but I think we could look into that and change it to the point. When we look at the deal with the around the power world, the university, that was done.
So you're saying the previous project, it was 14 inches higher than it was supposed to be when it got built up, something to that effect. Okay, I'll research that and get back to you on that. I'm not aware of that. It's an existing, you know, quote unquote compliant structure. So there's nothing, you know, from any of the city records or anything that indicate it's non-compliant anyway. Yeah.
You guys are one importantly, the life science building here, and you're going to have labs there, and you're going to be taking the harbor, you know, residents on one side, you would have a very busy, lots of things, very popular. So you have to mention, maybe you will, and they get soon, what are the, and you know, have you OSHA review what you're gonna do? What are you would have like, disposal waste, are you having human samples in there, animal ones, certain chemicals, or all types of that? It's not just space, but what is out of that space?
Right. Yeah, no, good question. So happy to spend a lot of time talking about this. So what we do in our projects are restricted to BL2 use. So if you're familiar with life science use, it's biological laboratory safety level 2. So it's might be slightly more aggressive than what you did in your high school science class. The testing that we do and what we do as a developer to ensure what we're doing is safe and looking at this location, first off, we spent a lot of time with BPDA to make sure that it's zoned properly for what the use is, being the location and location will have, right? So City of Boston's not gonna let us put labs someplace if we're not controlling what goes in and what goes out. So as I said, and what we're talking about here with the roof is all brand new mechanical, electrical, HVAC, fire protection systems for all the lab environments. So we do a bunch of what's called reentrainment studies to look at the air coming out of the building, what the impact is, what, diagrams of how air flows around the building, what happens with waste in and out of the building, how it exists today. So the building systems that are designed and put in is improvement in the environment that's there today. So what we do with our laboratories and the filtration system before air is exhausted, the air that comes out of the building is cleaner than the air coming into the building. So all the air, all the exhaust air coming out of the lab is triple habit filtered in our process and how we design labs. Now, again, it's restricted because we only do BL2 labs. So if Pfizer or some other life science company came to us and said, hey, we'd like to at least have space, but we do BL3 or BL4 work, they can't leave space in the building. It's not designed and accommodating for that. And it wouldn't meet code, it wouldn't get approval by Health and Human Services, wouldn't get approved by OSHA, it wouldn't be able to occupy the space. So it's not allowed. Sure.
So, I live around here, walk around your building all the time, great stuck through, you know, the rest of the harbor walk.
Sure.
There's a fair amount of space that's supposed to be dedicated to public access.
Correct.
There is sort of like, maybe there's one little sign that sort of talks about public access around that building, but there's no real way of accessing that public access. So there's a whole community that wants to be able to access it, except it's sort of private access. And so my question is, what are you going to do about being able to ensure public access? And what kinds of public access is going to be permitted, and how do we even find out about how the public can access that?
Yeah, good question. So it is accessible today. I agree with you, signage isn't good. That's what I was just saying, you know, people don't even know it's there. They walk by it and they don't see it, right? So what I can tell you is, from my perspective, I prefer that it's used all day, every day. I gain no benefit by nobody using that space. That space I have to register that with DEP. It's a chapter 91 license issue. If it just sits there vacant, it doesn't cost me any less money. It doesn't cost me more money if people use it. I want the space active. I want people doing it. It's one of the reasons we're partnering with these charity groups to come and use the space and bring inner city kids here to teach them about life sciences, and have the tenants who are in the upper floors of the building come down and talk to them about science, careers in science, and things that they can do as opportunities. So we are trying to work on a plan. Our partners here from NASA Strategies that support us in our public relations and our communication strategy. We're gonna have a website that we'll have up. We'll talk about that in a minute, about the project, about what's here, about what you can do, what you can't do. That's also a forum for us to communicate, hey, there's public access space, and we want people to come do it. We have staff that manage it. We have it today at 51 Sleeper Street, which is directly across the channel. And if you've been over by that building, I think you'll notice that we've made a huge change to that building that has made it much more welcoming and inviting for people to come in and use the public access space. So we are working on a more broadly identified communications plan so anybody can come in and use it. So we would love for it to be full all day, every day.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I'm Richard Koch. I live with the Intercontinental. I'm present in the conversation, the Intercontinental. Can you put the other slide up in a second?
Which one?
The one that has, no, keep going. Keep going. Stop. Okay, this is our building. We have 1,000 people that live here.
Yeah.
All right. The air for the building comes right up over here, right where you are going to have your towers blow the air out. So the air inside your building that you don't want to breathe, it's going to come up and it's going to be sucked into our building.
Why would no one breathe that air? The air coming out of that line is cleaner than the air going in.
What if?
I'm in these buildings all day. I walk through every day. I'll take you over to any building you want that we do.
Okay, stop. I'm done. All right.
Oh, well, you're making false statements, and that's a problem for me. The air is not blowing out and blowing into your building. My air that comes out is cleaner than the air that goes in.
Well, that's.
So air coming out of my building is cleaner. You benefit if that air was blowing towards you, but it's not. We've done retrainment studies.
Here's my question for you. Who is the tenants that you're gonna put in there and what are they gonna be using a laboratory for? Do you know that?
Life science tenants that are gonna do BL2 research. Yep.
You know who they are?
No, we don't have any tenants signed up today, but I can tell you on the portfolio who it is. So are you familiar with what a BL2 lab is? And
Yeah, I used to be a science teacher, but basically is that wherever the tenants are in here, when all of a sudden there is an alarm or something, or somebody drops a beaker or does something somewhere or something like that, your exhaust is gonna go on, I hope so. And everybody in there will get the air cleaned out, all right? That air is gonna go up in the air. If our building's gonna suck it in, so we're only 20 feet away from your building. And we own all this space right up to the edge of your building. I'm sure you know that. All right, so that's my worry. My worry is that, is there something environmentally sound that looking down the road, it's gonna be, whoops, we didn't think about that, or somebody else moved in here, or somebody's lied to you with what they're doing.
And yeah, so for anybody to occupy the building, they have to go through an entire process of review, also by the city of Boston. They have to get all of their permits to be able to occupy the building. They have to show an operational plan. They have to show what they do. So BL2 work, as you know, as a science teacher, is very simple biology work. It's done in either a biosafety cabinet or a fume hood, which has a HEPA filter in it. The space has a HEPA filter with the air coming out, and then there's a HEPA filter on the exhaust flue. So that's why I can tell you with 100% certainty that the air coming out is cleaner than the air that goes in.
Okay, but you don't know what's originating that air because you don't have a tenant yet that's gonna do something.
I do know what's going in, because we're supplying air into the building, and I can tell you when it's filtered out, what it is. There's no heavy chemistry that can happen in a BL2 lab, as you know, that would be a BL3 lab that would require an amphi room and all kinds of different OSHA standards for a BL3 lab, which is not allowed in the building. So there's no tenant could even get a permit, even if I said, hey, I don't care, I want to lease this space to Pfizer, they can't get a permit to operate.
I'm just saying, some mad scientist in a lab is in the corner, somebody is doing something, all right?
Happen anywhere.
I worry about that.
So, no, I'm happy, I want to make sure to answer your question, right?
Well,
So-
yeah, you know.
So the city of Boston Fire Department, for each floor and each space, there's what's called a control zone. So a tenant can't have just any chemicals, you can't have a rogue scientist going rogue in a building bringing chemicals.
Okay, you can't have that, you won't allow that, and the city won't allow it and so forth, but if it happens. All right, then air coming out of there is gonna be, and it may not hit your filters properly, because you don't know what they're working on.
No, I know everything, I know everything that all of our tenants are working on. We don't have any tenants in the building today. For all of our buildings, all of our tenants have to submit an operating plan that has a very detailed list of what they do, where they do it, what chemicals they use, what quantity of chemical they use, what the burn rate is on that chemical, what the gas off is. It's all very well defined and regulated, only by the city and the state,
My problem is that there's 1,000 people that live in this building,
right?
that breathe that air, so I worry about that. That's beyond all your paperwork and all the safeguards that you plan to have. That's fine.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Take this away.
Following on Rich's point.
Yeah.
Your other facilities, have there been any incidents,
No,
where you've had to report to the state or the city or your tenants that have had to do that? About something that was out of the compliance that you're talking about?
we have not had that happen. Once we had one tenant that wanted to occupy the space at 51 Sleeper Street. And we decided that they were at a kind of maximum threshold of allowable quantities. Technically, they would have been compliant, it would have been allowed. We made a decision as a management team that we didn't want that in our building. They're currently occupying space in another building in Seaport. So someone else in the city, another developer decided that was okay. We've had no non-compliance issues. And we have quarterly reviews by all the different city agencies that come through. It's usually more frequently than that because there's not a lot of commercial lab space in downtown Boston. So we have pretty frequent visitors to review and check on what we're doing. So we keep very detailed records of all that. We're happy to share that. Sure.
Hi, you said your building is completely permitted?
It
You're all
is.
ready to go?
It is.
So everything has been approved?
That's correct. Yes.
So I apologize because we did interrupt your.
No, it's okay. Please. Yeah. Okay.
So knowing all of that, what are you looking at for a timeline for construction and what kind of noise should we expect? When is work going to be done? The logistics.
Yeah, no, it's great. So there's a very detailed logistics plan, communications plan, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I think that's in. Just, here we go. So we'll just talk briefly about the communication plan and then you can talk about the timeline. So in terms of the communication plan, so community listserv. So we're trying to come up with every way possible to communicate to you all what the schedule is, when things are happening. So there's the weekly email blast, there's the look ahead schedule. So Danny will talk a little bit about the schedule, the logistics plan and transportation plan, which we have slides here that can show you at any point in time. All of our contact information will be on there. And so we're happy to kind of walk you through all that stuff at any point in time. No, actually, yeah, no, so we do a lot of testing around this as well, right? And this is all part of pollution and control. And so, again, as I was saying, even though the building systems that exist today are only 12 years old, it's pretty new for a commercial building in Boston. The new equipment that goes in is much more environmentally friendly. It's actually quieter than the existing equipment that's on the rooftop today. So the new mechanical system will be quieter than what we have today, correct?
Yeah, one of the things we presented at the beginning was the best in class team. So we have an acoustical consultant that works very closely with mechanical engineers to evaluate horsepower, span, noise, all those things. The city of Boston is extremely specific about what can and can't happen. And we have, contingencies and verify that, with a signed and sealed document from a professional engineer, they were all of that.
Sure, go ahead.
So my understanding about this building is that there is, one of the amenities has been that overlook on the roof.
Yes.
I understand your point about the view itself not being disrupted, but is the space available?
Space is still available. There's no change in the public access. The only thing we're trying to do honestly is activate it more. So we're putting urban farming up there. Trying to get more people involved in urban farming on the rooftop. It exists today, but nobody uses it. The other thing we're doing for stormwater and environmental purposes is putting sedum trays on the roof as another environmental measure, but it does not impact the existing public access, and that's not going to change or be moved in any way.
You anticipate engaging the public about how to activate the facility?
Yeah.
That is one of the unfortunate things that we have in my modification of the place too. And like there is in the use of the lack of formal public process.
Yeah, so I think, as I said earlier, I'd love to spend more time communicating. I think there's a lot of different key stakeholders that have say there. I would love to have it very active. We put forward programs, try to get permits for this fall to have some live music and have a charitable event, and it was shot down. So we have a lot of ideas of how we'd like to activate it. If people would like it active, we would love to do that. If people would be supportive of that, I'd love to talk to anybody at any time that would help support the initiative to further activate it, because I think it's a really interesting nexus in Boston, connecting the financial district to Seaport. And some of the questions you have about security in different areas of the city, the more office buildings that empty out and aren't occupied, there's more challenges in the city. And I think we have an opportunity at this project to engage all the different amenities that the city offers people and bring it to barriers. We have a dock, we have a deck, we have a roof deck. We think it's a great building and a great location. We'd love to do that. Mark, I know I'm taking probably more time than you expected,
Well, I
but
think that's great. What I would like to suggest, and I know this is a development of great interest to lots of people. What I'd like to suggest is that we field questions that we can ask Matthew if you're willing to come back. And we'll give you some of those questions perhaps in advance, so that we want to make sure that even though there are theoretically this project is going forward, that there are opportunities to in any way influence it that you're amenable to and that is important to the community, that we have a chance to be able to present those questions or those thoughts. So how do you have another question?
Did you mention when you expect construction to start?
Construction start date? Yes, so as we're permitted, construction is started on the inside of the building. As one of the community outreach pieces with the different phases of that, you will see visible external construction, specifically around the access plans from Atlantic Avenue. One of the challenges with the building is it's only access from the short side of the building. You have the water on the east side, on the north side, you have the pier, and then on the south side, you have the Intercontinental property. So our only access is via Atlantic Avenue. We have a very thoughtful logistics plan. It's looking at the different phases of construction.
Yeah, I think we would all be interested in seeing the logistics plan in detail.
Yeah.
Perhaps next month.
So you won't be starting now within the next month.
So
or
the
so?
work has already started.
Yeah, we've already
inside the building.
started
There's already been demolition that started inside the building.
Oh,
So that's already been ongoing.
I think we're probably less interested in the inside than the outside, but I think that's a key concern to, one more question.
Considering how much thought you're telling us you're putting into this, and considering how close you are to the Intercontinental, I would ask you reach out to, Heidi and some of the other folks, Rich, and really set up some real engagement. Certainly a little disappointed that you went through the whole process of making a lot of these decisions, including the logistics, without engaging your neighbors. When I've done development in the city, one of the things City Hall almost orders us to do is engage your abutters. And there doesn't seem to have been that here. And so I ask and encourage you to do that immediately.
No, we're happy to continue to do it. We have reached out to the Intercontinental. We've asked for meetings and the opportunity to kind of present the plan. we can only ask. So, yeah.
I think we'll offer you some suggestions on it,
Yeah.
on how to further engage, and we'll get some questions and hopefully. Great. Thank you very much, both of you for coming here, and, we look forward to having you back for more conversations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We have another important topic, encourage you all to stay, there are, before you all leave, I just mentioned, we are about to open up a new membership opportunity for anyone who would like to, become either an associate member or a friend of the Wharf District Council. And we would ask you to, consider that. We certainly want your involvement and your support. Lastly, no, not quite lastly, we have a presentation, let's see, Jacob? Is Jacob here? Jacob's gonna give us a presentation, about some proposed changes to Liberty Square. And, this is, involves the local streets, and then a final presentation, by the folks from the Hope Lobster, is that right? Yes, that's what Suzanne said. So we'll go through both of these, briefly if we can. Okay. Did that make it on there?
Thanks, everyone. I'm Jacob Wethel. I lead the public realm program at the Boston Transportation Department. So not here to take questions about any other streets other than the very small one I'll be presenting to you about tonight. But knowing the boundaries here of the council, so we want to talk about the other side of the district, Liberty Square, which is the intersection of Water Street, Kilby Street, Water Street and Kilby Street, which also includes Liberty Square, which is a small little street that runs for just over 100 feet. So though it's marked on Google Maps as Hawes Street, it's officially titled Liberty Square per the city of Boston. So part of what I do at the city is look to create new public spaces out of our streets and our sidewalks, and more dynamic spaces for people to recreate, be leisurely, and meet workers, neighbors, friends, and whatnot. And so one of the tasks that we had both from Plain Downtown and throughout the city was finding more spaces where we could have pedestrian areas. Two of the key spaces we've done this downtown already is Tontine Crescent Plaza, which is on Franklin Street. If anyone knows the restaurant, The Merchant, used to have a very wide street there about 5 years ago. Then for about 3.5 years, there was a painted plaza that was there that was bright green. And then over the last couple of years, we got fully planted trees and things like that. Now the Merchant has a patio out there, as well as other movable tables and chairs, planters and whatnot. The other location is Phillips Square in Chinatown, so Harrison Ave and Essex Street. That's in that interim phase, also green. I need to get away from that bright neon color a bit, but that was a street that was sort of wider. It was formerly that had a two-way configuration that then became one way, and so we were able to narrow it without really impacting traffic flow or parking, but create additional public space. I know like 2 weekends ago, Councilor Flynn was out there with members of the Chinatown community sort of gathering, so there's seating out there and trees and whatnot. But so what we look to do is create spaces that can be developed rather quickly, so we can see how they work, see how traffic might change, but also see what types of elements should be there. I would say in the Chinatown Plaza, there's some benches that are pretty uncomfortable and I wouldn't buy again. And so the trees have not matured very well. And so we learn things like this before we go through a full reconstruction or decide to take something away. So Liberty Square is right here. It's sort of at the nexus of an office district with a fair amount of ground floor retail as well. You have everything from a printing shop and a lot of midday office lunch places that some of us at City Hall frequent quite regularly, as well as some vacant storefronts as well, but a lot of office above. Some of them are from landscape architects to law firms to whatnot. And so this is the existing piece of roadway. For one day in 2019, we had some interns at our Mayor's Office of Bureau of Mechanics transform that very exact space into a place where people could hang out, have fun. And particularly because we see in the previous photo, I have another photo I typically use. Sometimes you'll see on that planter face, like people sitting there, all having their lunch, sort of just facing the street. So you're able to see what would happen just for one day, just for a couple of hours. And so we're ready. It's been a while since 2019, but we have a set of standards that we have at the city that help us. We work with engineers and others at City Hall and community members that help us sort of think about what are our tools in our toolbox to make changes on the streets. So that's things like planters, that's things like paint, that's things like movable tables and chairs that can help us make quick change. It was very helpful for us when there was the necessity of having outdoor dining be expanded across the city. We could use some of these tools to think more. The mayor spoke some about block parties, which is also part of this toolkit. But I'll speak mostly to what you can see on the right side of the screen, which is a plaza implementation. So for Liberty Square, some of what we're looking for feedback on and also for design suggestions and help would be, what path forward should we take? Here are some sort of plazas that are similar in other cities. So this one in Washington, DC, here's some in New York City and Los Angeles, where you see it's not a full build project. It's something that's just painted, that's just done rather quickly, but gives us the ability to look at that physical space. This one in New York City is sort of one of the first pedestrian plazas like that as well, without actually digging everything up. So when we look at materials for what could be in place in Liberty Square, we look for everything from fun games to seating. I think as all the lunch goers in that area would make use of, thinking about shade, or also given it's a pretty shaded area, thinking about other ways that we can liven up the area or maybe add more lighting, and planters and types of plants that would survive in that sort of shady environment. Lots of different type of activities and sort of design treatments that we can think of when we think about Liberty Square. So I want to say this is something that we're looking to deploy on a sort of pilot basis to sort of examine how it might function over the next 6 to 9 months. And with the looking to different ways that we can implement this that keeps those that are in offices, residents, retail tenants and all those customers sort of generally excited about the concept, but also giving us some design critique as we sort of take some of those live, critiques in the space. And so it's everything from looking at different ways that the ground could be treated, from blue to beige to all sorts of funky colors to different ways that you can do it. As you saw from the New York example, there's sometimes great muralists that do great walls, just like you have inside of the aquarium. Other muralists, we have one in East Boston, which applied that directly on the ground. And then just as we're thinking through the plaza, right, we think through how all these elements could be integrated into the space, and it could be something that's beige and more traditional. It could be something that's a little more daring, and we could think about all these sorts of different options. So that is essentially our pitch for Liberty Square Plaza. Folks might be wondering, so what's happening in Liberty Square right now? It's a no stopping zone. It's not somewhere where cars are supposed to be parking. There is a degree of loading that happens, which we are aiming to accommodate sort of on either side, so that where sort of these green dots are, those are planters. There's space for we've been doing observations there. There's a Staples truck that comes every day. There's a WB Mason truck. There's a lot of different, I've gotten to know the UPS delivery people personally. And so we want to make sure that there's space for them. We know that they're still going to be coming to the area. And so that will be accommodated as well. And we're learning more as we talk to those ground floor tenants. And so then I would just say, lastly, folks might be wondering, well, what about cars that typically use that to get from, let me get the street names right, Kilby Street onto Water Street, or Hawes onto Water, anyways, trucks, this is sort of the larger truck that we simulate that can make that turn. We run it with smaller trucks as well. This is not a key fire department route given where the big house is located. But vehicles can make that turn as well. So that you have this, some of you may have this form here. I think the QR code may not work, but it will work tomorrow once I fix the link. So keep it with you. There, I will also send out the link to our website where you can submit feedback, but more importantly, we'll be out in the space in the coming weeks and months to sort of get feedback, but ultimately implement this in a very temporary way that could be taken away, but to really see whether there's problems with that turning radius, whether there's issues about loading, and whether people decide to get their, great burrito from Cafe Mexico or their Boston kebab and sit out there and look at the statue that's right there.
And what do you see as the timeline?
We would like to implement this by the fall, so long as there aren't any outstanding issues with nearby folks or city staff.
Great, thank you. I know that our members will also, since we're short on time this evening, want to be able to pose some questions or offer suggestions. Anybody want to ask a question at the moment? Yes.
I think it would be really cool to, you want to do it this fall?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you don't have time for a competition to paint the ground. Paint the ocean on it and you paint a clipper ship. It's Boston.
Hi, Jacob, my question real quick was, have you considered the impact? You're only a block away from State Street. If State Street traffic is worse, and now you're going down Water Street to take a right on Battery March, people are going to be stopping, Uber cars are going to be stopping, there's going to be more disruption of traffic both directions in a 1 block radius. Have you considered the impact of one project or the other?
Yes, I would say that the street where you see the truck in the top right corner of the street is very narrow. It's not a street that many people take because you're forced to, you're either taking a right or a left because you hit a one way the other direction. And then it shoots you right back onto State Street. So if you're on Broad, it's mostly local traffic that's circulating here, doing deliveries, entering the garage, going to the loading dock at 75 State, things of that nature. But yes, we are considering this in coordination with all the other sort of street changes that are taking place. And as I mentioned, this is not yet, it would be years off from doing any sort of curve change or anything that would be reversible.
Thank you, and I'm sure we're going to offer you some thoughts and suggestions, and we'll see you there.
Great.
Thank you. We have one final presentation about the Hook Lobster. I'm sorry. Do we have a presentation?
No, I don't have a presentation. I'll keep it very brief. Hi, hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Tyler Hensler. I'm an attorney that actually works on Water Street. So that last one piqued my interest. So thank you for inviting us here tonight. I'm here with James Hook. This is John Mulcairn. We are here basically to add cordials, to ask you to add, for support, to add cordials to our existing beer and wine license. Boston regulations, state regulations allow holders of beer and wine licenses to add, cordials. This would allow us, to offer things, like cognac and liqueurs and Aperol for things like brunch drinks, Aperol spritzes, things of that nature. It's not a full alcohol license. Stronger spirits such as vodka, whiskey, gin would not be allowed to be served. It's not, it's just a small tweak to the existing license. James Hook is applying due to customer requests and general public demand. As all businesses in the Wharf district know, the trend of work from home or hybrid models has emerged, has an effect on all businesses, restaurants especially. And this is one way in which we are trying to adapt to the times. James Hook has proven itself to be a liquor licensee without blemish, without violation, and will continue this spotless record with the addition of cordials. We've applied for no other operational changes. Nothing else will change day to day. Thank you for your time. We're happy to take any questions. Yes, please.
Usually J Hook closes at 5 o'clock. So are people gonna be drinking cordials like at 3:30?
You'd be
Or do you
surprised.
plan to keep open a little later?
No, we just keep it regular hours.
Yeah, change in hours would involve another meeting before you find folks. So if that ever happens, you'll hear about it. But no, again, more brunch drinks, those kinds of things. So thank you. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, sorry.
If the development there, does go through, would this license modification just carry over to the new restaurant or whatever?
I believe so, yeah, we own it.
So you basically,
pay
yeah,
for it. and you own
once
it.
you have it, you have it.
Yeah, or you want to sell it.
But if you don't continue to operate at that location, it doesn't, right? It can be moved.
Can move, or you can sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I'm not sure it's. Immediate concern.
And, yeah, we're.
So as a reminder, what our process is that after this meeting, and it will not be tonight, it will be next week. There will be a convening of members of the Wharf District Council to provide feedback or response on the presentations we've had this evening, including this one. And we look forward to getting back to you with the response by the members.
Thank you, Doug.
Is it open as a?
Thank you very much.
Is it open as a public? Or is it private?
The vote is for members. But we encourage you all to become associate members through this new process that we have coming up. So, thank you all very much for coming. And I probably have really.
Right. I was worried that Ray Love was stuff. Yeah. I watched them, make sure to see that, yeah, I would take it back up. We're gonna have to really put good development.
You know, and by the way, it's saying that.
Well. To be fair. But it also made me not know.
You all heading back?
Yeah, wait a minute, I guess my two. Yeah, but
I was worried you left and forgot that, so I'm just make sure I saw you or I would have brought it back.
I am very great, I am very.
I was Mayor Wolf, I saw half of the problem. I always feel like it's just speech, you know, that
Yeah, it wasn't anything of substance. She's very pleasant. She's
the question I have is.
She's very approachable and she's very clear that she didn't agree with the work district on a couple of issues. Especially
Now,
since.
how are they gonna measure the air coming out of that building? Are they gonna be a machine or something?
Dr. Wong is over there. Who has Dr. Wong? She has so many specific questions